Complexity equals anxiety. Simplicity equals serenity. I love that. That is so powerful because, again, just as I said, when life gets complex, that's when we tend to start feeling stressed and feeling anxious. And if we can figure out, am I juggling too many balls right now? Am I saying yes when I should be saying no? Then when you can start to release some of that and have a more simple life, the peace and serenity that can come from that, it's a wonderful gift to give yourself. Namaste. Many of us reach our 50s and realize that we've accidentally built a life we didn't actually choose. We didn't design it. We got here almost on autopilot, following society's unwritten rules, reacting, saying yes to everyone else's priorities. And if you feel like that's you, and you're on this merry-go-round, well, guess what? Today's episode is your permission to stop. Because we're going to talk about why the most successful women aren't the ones piling more onto their plate. They're the ones with the courage to prune it back to the quintessence. It's time to stop stumbling and start living on purpose. And today's episode is actually inspired by my listening on one of my daily walks to this week's Pulse newsletter about Gene Key 23, which moves from complexity to quintessence, and it's the path of simplicity. Now, if I've totally thrown you and you're like, Gene Keys, what is she talking about? let me give you a very short explanation because it can be complicated, but it's essentially what the Gene Keys are. They're something that was created by Richard Rudd, and they are a map of 64 human archetypes, based on our DNA, that show how our shadows can be transformed into gifts and at their highest level into spiritual qualities, something that Richard called a siddhi. So you can learn more about the Gene Keys because there's a lot to dive into. And you can actually subscribe to the Pulse newsletter, which is free, by going to genekeys.com. And I will have that in the show notes, so don't worry. So that was sort of the impetus, because he in the newsletter, he kept in this recording, I should say, about Gene Key 23, he kept talking about designing your life. And I'm like, well, that's what I talk about on the podcast. So I'm going to share a bit of what I learned from him and how I'm interpreting it for you today. So So I hope you'll continue to listen now that I've gotten that out of the way. So here's the deal. We built a life we didn't necessarily consciously design. We, as we age, we're dealing with, if you get married or you buy a house, you've got mortgages, you've got kids, you've got your career. And, and as I said, there's a lot of expectations about how you're supposed to act and behave. I mean, heck, I even remember, back in my 20s, when you first what often happens is when you get married is then starts to become the pressure. Well, when are you going to have a kid, And so then you either do or you don't. I did in my case. And then, sometimes I feel like our life kind of gets on this hamster wheel. I worked full time. I used to work at a television station down in Miami, and I was on the staff of the Nightly Business Report. So I did that for many years. And then I was raising 2 children, and and life starts to happen. And then you reach a certain point where it's like, Is this all there is? So let's put this in context of what the Gene Keys were talking about, though. And Gene Key 23, which talks about this shadow of complexity. And yeah, it really is. It's like all of this stuff. It is sort of this hamster wheel, we get on that we're always doing, and maybe you're volunteering. And I remember when the kids were in school, I was I volunteered to write a newsletter for the school, and so I that was my job, gathering information and then putting that together. I would send out press releases when they had events, and then there was Girl Scouts for my daughter, and again, I'm working full time at at the same time, and cooking meals, doing the laundry. All of this is like gets to be so complex, and our lives are just moving so fast. And one of the benefits of being older now is that we can start to take a look at this and say, okay, that's how my life was. Do I want to continue doing that? Do I really want to keep up this rat race, or do I want to start slowing down and enjoying life? And then eventually you get to a point possibly where you're no longer working, and you can start doing maybe some of those things that you thought about, let's say in your 20s and your early 30s, and you're like, yeah, someday I'll get to that. Someday, you know. Well, perhaps someday is here. And even if you are younger and you're listening to this podcast, don't put off stuff. I will tell you this, because for me, as an example, I I didn't travel to Europe for the first time until I was in my 50s. Yeah, yeah, 50s. I think yeah, it was what was it? 7 years ago, something like that. So I was in my 50s. And whereas my sister had gone when she was in her 20s, I think. My mother had gone. Um, my son has now gone in his 20s, and I think because he followed the example now of his sister, probably because she's the world traveler in the family. But my point is that it's never too late or early to design your life your way. So I'm gonna come back to that. Yeah. So let's what do I want to talk about? Okay, so how do we move? So if we have this complex life, how do we start dealing with that? Because yeah, it's about really getting things into more balance. But I know a lot of people talk about having your life in balance. I prefer harmony because, well, I guess I'm a musician, so that's probably one reason why I like harmony better. But I feel that there's always stuff is going to be going on in your life, the good, the bad, the complex, the not so complex. And it's not always easy to have it be perfectly in line. But if you can have things be a little bit more harmonious in your life and figure out, where are these areas of my life that are feeling too complex. And I'll tell you a good clue is if you are finding that you are stressed, that's a really good indicator when your body starts reacting and you're having a backache perhaps or a headache. Your body knows, and I know I've probably talked about this on a podcast before, but it really does know. It sends signals when things are out of alignment. I mean, and literally for me, I know when my back is out of alignment, it's usually because there's something else in my life that is out of alignment. And so rather than rushing to make that appointment with the chiropractor like I used to do, and the chiropractor helped me, don't get me wrong, but now I sit with it a little bit and I question it and I wonder and I get curious. It's like, okay, what's where in my life right now am I out of alignment? And if nothing comes to mind, then I probably will make the appointment with a chiropractor. But the last couple of times this has happened, I have figured it out and I've seen, oh, yeah, okay. Yeah. And as soon as I made an adjustment in my lifestyle, whether it was cutting back or maybe spending some more time in meditation or whatever it was, within about 2 days or so, the back was better. So one of the things that Richard talked about in this recording, I loved he had this equation. He said, complexity equals anxiety. Simplicity equals serenity. I love that. That is so, so powerful because again, just as I said, when life gets complex, that's when we tend to start feeling stressed and feeling anxious. And if we can figure out, am I juggling too many balls right now? Am I saying yes when I should be saying no? Then when you can start to release some of that and have a more simple life, maybe even just a simple day, maybe sometimes you just need a simple day out of your week. The peace and serenity that can come from that. It's a wonderful gift to give yourself. So you don't need a total life overhaul. Instead, it's like many small internal changes to really get back to the essential. And one of the ways that I can do that, I work from home during the, so I'm in front of a computer all day. And if you are in front of a computer all day, you know that it can be tiring and stressful. So I make it a point to get up from my computer every half an hour or so and walk around my office, look out the window. I got a lovely window here beside me. And to just pause because we need to give ourselves that gift, that break during the day, because that's where clarity comes from. If you've ever been working on a project, sometimes the best way, especially if you get stuck, is to take a break, go for a walk, read fiction for a few minutes, maybe, but get your mind off of that because we have to give our brains a break sometimes so that it can free up new ideas. I'm going to pause for a moment and take a drink of water. The other thing that Richard talked about in this recording about Gene Key 23 that I thought was interesting was he talked about the way to be able to move into simplicity and to go from complexity to quintessence is to get down to the essence. And he said that our hands are actually the key to that. And it makes sense because so often we are using our hands in other ways. We're using them on our phones. We are using them to type on our keyboards. We are living in this digital world, and there's something to be said for getting back to analog and doing things by hand. technology was supposed to be this great time-saving thing for us back in the day, vacuum cleaners and then, electric alarm clocks and, all of these things. But have you noticed how tied we are to our phone now? People go on vacation and, your boss can get a hold of you because you've got your phone with you. I mean, what kind of a break is that? Yes, in the old days when we didn't have smartphones and we had those landlines, you had to communicate by mail, or if it was an emergency, you could send a telegram. But I remember when my sister went away to college, and this was in the 70s, and so she'd occasionally call long distance, but long distance was expensive, so you couldn't talk long. And my mom, when I went to summer camp, she would write me letters. And I looked forward to getting those letters in the mail all the time because I was far away. She couldn't, just call me up and check on me. I don't know if they let kids have phones at summer camp. Let me know in the comments if they do. I don't know. But it's technology in a way sometimes has just made things more complex. Uh, as an example, AI, again, here's another wonderful tool. How many different software programs out there are there now that are helping you? You've got ChatGPT, you've got Claude, there's Google has Gemini, there's I don't know, so many more. I one way that I found to make that process less complex is I was referred to a tool called Gab, which actually pulls from ChatGPT. It pulls from Claude. So, and then it also has the images, and it has the ability to create videos and all of this. So it's an all-in-one thing. I'll put the link to that in the in the show notes too, because it's a pretty cool tool. I like it a lot. Uh, it does live up to its name of being gabby. So you can get into some back and forth conversations that you might have to like put the brakes on and say, okay, stop. But it is forcing me to think about things. So I'll maybe talk about that in a future episode. But my point is, let me get back to my point. What is my point? Let's see. Simplicity. Yes. And our hands. How does our hands fit into this? So rather than spending using typing all the time and chatting, and swiping and all of that fun stuff, what about using our hands for things more simple, like cleaning? That's not my favorite thing. Cooking, I do enjoy cooking. I like to play music. So strumming a guitar or playing my keyboard. So that is different keys, not this kind of computer keyboard. Maybe painting or writing. Oh, writing. I have gotten back into my morning practice of doing morning pages. I'm writing 3 pages every morning. Most of the time, it's just, what am I going to do that day? Or what is the cat doing right now? But it's just this, I just keep the pen moving. It's just the stream of consciousness. But it has become one of my most favorite parts of my morning after meditation, because I'm seeing the fruits of the labor, because it's allowing me to get stuff out of my head, to free up my brain so that when I go on to, say, LinkedIn in the morning and I want to comment on people, I'm not relying on AI to write me comments. I've seen those comments that people use AI for. There's a clear tell, but I'm using my own brain and I'm coming up with my own ideas again. And it feels so good. Again, like I said, I love AI. It's really good, but we humans need to remember that we are creative, and as much as AI can help us design our life, you are still the person who's in control of that. And you get to decide how you want to design your life, and you can find ways. I encourage you to find ways to simplify whatever is going on in your life, because it will help you gain clarity to make decisions. It will help you to start leaning into your own intuition and use it to make decisions that will benefit you or your family or your friends or your clients. Yeah. Okay. So that's what I want to tell you about that. So what I want to do now is, instead of just telling you about quintessence, I want to actually give you a chance to experience, about really getting into the essence, because I'm going to share a few minutes of light language with you, and it's a frequency that is meant to help you sort of get out of your thinking brain and into your feeling belly. So if you're listening to this recording right now while you're driving, I would encourage you to pause it and come back to it when you can be somewhere where you can sit down. Because what I'd like you to do is to just be in a place where you can be still and undisturbed. And as you listen, place your hands over your heart or over your belly. And don't try to figure out what I'm going to be sharing with you, the sounds that come out. But just let your hands actually feel the rhythm of your own essence as you listen. So I'm going to do that for you now, right now. I'm going to get settled and take one more drink of water before I do that. Okay. All right. And as always, I also do, when I share light languages, I set an intention that the message that comes through is going to be for your highest good, my highest good, and the highest good of all concerned. Hoka no kuya, konakaya no hua, konaya kohua, konukaya no gya, anakia tua. Sono yoto koreana, koyoto kushana kala, shekia no korea ponka, ala kia no korea tokuma nani, kasa niana korea papa, ala kia no korea shakuya manakayata, kora da da gada ya shingadea, okaya no korea pachingala, horiato tonkalita, okaya no kia patingada. O takaya naka wa o koyo to koyo anakia koyo hu kanakaya tu kodia no koya na Esio no koya vishka lato dian korea taya manakai anakia to wingate Sakaya no korea funkale Otaku kayo, kayo ne, anakia nekia. Saksha no kriya vikianaka, o manakia tayashaka, anakia takia manaka, anakika haye, anaye koyatanginga, atakiana koya manakiata, atakiyashakia takayamata. Ona kikala teriata dama shakariata. Makayata kiyamanta kuyata tsinkashikata dana goma. Ala te anakia shingareta. Ata kuya nakifa. Anakikara te shomane, shomane, shomane. Honakikala. Take a deep breath. Ooh. Oh, and bring yourself back and notice the silence. Mm, that silence is the quintessence we're talking about. It's there before the words, and it's what remains after. And now that we've cleared that mental static, we have some spaciousness to talk about architecture. How do you actually build a life that feels like yours rather than one that you just stumbled into? So we're going to go through a couple of steps here. I've got four things I want to share with you today. So the first one is what I'm going to call the pruning audit, or the courage to say no. So again, as I mentioned earlier, you can't add simplicity into a life that's overflowing. No, you've got to subtract first. So how do we do this? Okay. Well, you start by being curious, as I mentioned earlier, and ask yourself, what is one commitment, one belief, or maybe even one should on your plate right now that is actually creating more anxiety than it is providing purpose? So take a look at that. Maybe journal about it, maybe just think about it. But I would encourage you to journal, because it's amazing what comes out when you put pen to paper. And I mean, if you want to journal on the computer, you can, but the hands, remember? We talked about the hands. So journaling the answer to this question, I think, would be really great for you, because, and I know I think I've talked about this on the show before, that I still remember this. One of the first presentations I attended when I was just starting out as a copywriter was from a couple of life coaches, and they shared a presentation called "No is a Complete Sentence." So it's okay to say no. If someone, asks you to do something and your plate is full, it's okay to kindly say, I would love to, and I don't have the time for it right now. Or I just can't. Or thank you, but no. Again, no is a complete sentence. You don't necessarily even have to give a big explanation. And remember, here's the thing. If then someone tries to make you feel like you're being selfish for wanting to say no, I'm going to come into the mic here a little bit and let you in on a little secret. You're not being selfish. You are being self-full, because you are filling your cup by saying no. If someone is insisting and bugging you about it, they're the ones being selfish. So, and I learned that lesson from someone else. I think it was Louise Hay, as a matter of fact. God rest her soul. But yeah, so that's it. So the next thing I want to tell you about is really getting into this analog rhythm of designing by hand. So what I want you to consider doing is to get involved in some type of analog movement this week. Identify, come up with one task that preferably that you would like to do, because we don't want this to be a chore. But, whether it's gardening, whether it's cooking, maybe it's organizing a drawer. Yesterday, I went through and organized a box of pictures. I have pictures of my that were from my grandmother. Okay. My grandmother was born in 1903. So there's some really old pictures in there, but they're also not labeled on the back of them who these people are, or sometimes they are, but it's written in Hungarian. So that was fun. But I'm like sorting out, okay, these people I know, that's good. We'll keep those pictures. These other ones I'm not sure about. I'm going to have to find some other relatives that may know who these people are. So, but that was something I did with my hands. I had to sort through the pictures. So, see what you can do this week that does not involve a digital device. Go analog, even if it's just for 30 minutes out of your day this week. But it's a really great practice to get into because what it's going to do, it's going to start training your hands to master your environment. Because again, when the hands master the ordinary, the mind gains clarity to master the extraordinary. What do you think about that? I like that. Let me know if that works for you. Third concept that I want to give to you today. The third one is how to design from the pause. And again, this is, taking before you say yes to anything, I would say, because, and this is something that I do, I've had to learn to do because sometimes I will like react on impulse and I'll just respond. And so I had to learn that when someone asks me something is to pause. For like 3 seconds, maybe even count 1, 2, 3 in your head, not that fast. 1, 2, 3. Because what it does is and I would also add in not only just pausing, but also take a breath. That breath helps you to get out of that limbic brain, I think it is, that automatic brain, but to really get back into your thinking brain and to allow you to then really see, is this something I should do? And as I'm doing this, I'm like putting my hand on my heart. So you might even want to do that too. Put your hand on your heart or your belly when someone asks you a question and really feel into it and say, okay, does this ask make me feel tight, constricted, anxious, or am I, either neutral or expansive? Because if, whatever the answers are, then that leads you to then be able to speak your answer to that request. And then because now you're coming from an embodied place. I really like taking a deep breath. Breathing, it's something that we take for granted, but it's such a gift. It is such a gift. And when we consciously acknowledge that and practice it, it does wonders for our physical body, our mental body, our spiritual body. Because again, it's like life seems so rushed and complex these days, but it doesn't have to be. You don't have to let life control you. You get to control life, and you get to control how you respond to life. So you have permission to pause, to take a breath, to feel in your body and decide, okay, is this the decision I want? What decision do I want to make today? How can I move forward and make my life the way I want it? All right. The last section or session or last point, I guess I want to leave you with today is the handmade life commitment. So You don't have to change everything overnight. Okay? Don't feel like you gotta go out and just radically, blow up your life. No, 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 I'm not advising you that. We can take one one shift, one little micro step today. You can just do one, maybe even an internal thing, whether it is committing yourself to maybe just doing some journaling today. Or maybe it's just taking a pause and listening to some music or petting your cat or dog. Again, maybe washing the dishes by hand instead of throwing them in the dishwasher. You know, when I was a kid, I actually liked washing the dishes, as I remember, because I would put music on. Oh, wow, I just had this thought. Yes, this reminder of myself when I was like a teenager. And I would put music on in the kitchen, and we had a lovely window over our kitchen sink, and so I could look out in the backyard and wash dishes. Yeah. So, what is one thing that you can redesign this week that honors the rhythm of your own essence? I would love to know. And in fact, I'm going to put a little plug in here that I would love to hear from you directly. I've got for those of you watching on YouTube or on New Reality TV, I've got my little ticker going by that says go to engagewithgloria.com to schedule a call and let's just talk about it. I'm not going to sell you anything. I just would love to hear what you did this week. Was it a challenge for you to try to find some way to add a little simplicity in your life, to be able to do something with your hands? So yeah, it's just, it's like a 20-minute call and I would just love to get to know you. And frankly, if you take advantage of this, I would love to know what other challenges you have in your life because then I could talk about it in a future episode. Hey, and I will, if you give me permission, I'll even, give you a shout out for the idea. So yeah, I would love to hear from you. Sometimes it gets a little lonely in my house when I'm all by myself, except for my two little kitty cats, but they only speak feline. They don't speak human. So take advantage of that. And again, I'll have the link in the show notes as well. Yeah, I would love to hear from you. Let me know, what do you think of the episodes? Do you like what I'm talking about? Is it useful? Uh, how you felt about the light language? I would love to know all of that. So thank you. All right. I think that's going to do it for this week's episode of Design Your Life Your Way. I really thank you so much for listening today, being with me, and I really hope that today's show has inspired you to live boldly and on purpose.